Well, it gives me very great pleasure, last but not least of the Stars and Stones Forum, Hugh Newman, my good friend from, well, sometimes Cambridge, but more Glastonbury. That's where I've seen most of him. And of course, he's the organiser of the very excellent Megalithic conference. And last winter, he was travelling in the USA and had some very exciting experiences, which I certainly haven't yet shared with him. So let's all be privileged to that together. Hugh Newman.
Thank you very much, John. It is a pleasure to be here at the Stars and Stones Forum in November 2009. I've been here a couple of times before discussing very local sites such as Wandlebury and also my Stone Age survival Earth energies research. But today we're going to have a look at the New World, New England specifically, and explore the amazing countryside there and all the megalithic sites that are there. Because when I went to America, I didn't really have many ideas about there being really megalithic sites there. But as soon as you start exploring New England, you find that there's hundreds of chambers, dolmens, standing stones, and many, unusual artifacts that we're going to cover in this talk. But America itself is a very interesting landscape because over in California and throughout the Midwest and the Southwest, there's many sites. We'll have a quick look at them before we get into the talk. But first, I want to dedicate this to my favourite ever author, John Michell. And I use this quote really in most of my talks, whatever I'm talking about, whether it's earth grids, earth energies, sites in Cambridgeshire or whatever, because it really does summarise what it's all about to me, that there was a global kind of movement of developing and building megalithic sites. So I'll just read this out to you because I think this is a very important quote. A great scientific instrument lies sprawled over the entire surface of the globe. At some period, perhaps it was over 4,000 years ago, almost every corner of the world was visited by a group of men who came with a particular task to accomplish. With the help of some remarkable power by which they could cut and raise enormous blocks of stone, these men erected vast astronomical instruments, circles of upright pillars, pyramids, underground tunnels, cyclopean alignments, whose course from horizon to horizon was marked by stones, mounds, and earthworks. The vast scale of prehistoric engineering is not yet generally recognised. And those are the words of John Michell from The View Over Atlantis. So this is the Serpent Mound in Ohio. So I just want to briefly have a look at some of the other amazing landscape sites that we have there. This is down the Midwest, just north of the whole Mississippi River. And you can see that they're effigy mounds. And there's lots of these different type of effigy mounds throughout the sort of Midwest, mainly the northern Midwest. But if you go all the way down the Mississippi, virtually right into Florida, there's been recorded 10,000 earth mounds, earthworks, and even earthen pyramids as well. And these are just recognised, they're not recognised rather by the archaeologists as being anything older than the Native Americans. But there's lots of evidence now that even giants between 8 foot and 12 foot tall skeletons have been discovered at the very base of some of these mounds. And they've been dated to prehistoric times. The ones in Florida up to about 8,000 years ago. So we're seeing a very ancient culture which lived in the landscape across North America. This is another famous one called Cahokia. And this was one of the central sites of the early peoples there. And you can see the sort of Aztec or Mayan style of the earthen pyramid here in the picture on the bottom. There's not much left of it now. And the problem is many of these mounds are just, there's so much development in America that they just get ruined and destroyed by developers. But luckily the early reports of these sites recorded many of the artifacts, many of the skeletons of giant nature which were found there. Unfortunately, the Smithsonian got involved, and suddenly everything starts disappearing and getting dismissed. Smithsonian Gate, some people call it, because there's so much, problems with things going missing. And even in California, there's a place called Lompoc. It's not the one on the screen now, but a place called Lompoc, just north of LA, where it was recorded in the early 1800s rather, that 12-foot giant with bronze armor was found on Lompoc Ranch. I actually went there last year when I was in America to try and find any evidence of this giant that was discovered, and there was nothing. And the whole area, Lompoc Ranch, is now a military zone, and you can't go anywhere near it, interestingly. And this is some recent discoveries just on the Channel Islands off the coast of California. They found ancient culture there that goes back to about 5,000 or 6,000 years old, with some megalithic remains there, although no photographs are available as yet. And so the whole of America really has a great prehistoric history which is totally dismissed and overlooked. And it's one of my intentions is to explore America over the years and actually present this and get it out there to the American public. Because often when I was there, I'm just an English megalithomaniac on holiday, and you go there and you find all this stuff and you try and tell people about what's in their backyard, and they're like, what? You know, and they don't get it, that there's an ancient heritage there. But anyway, today we're going to focus on the New England, the states of New England. There's New York State as well, which is kind of missing off this map. But these are the kind of states that I looked around. I didn't really go to Maine because it started getting very cold up in that area when I was there, and it was a bit ridiculous to try and get up there. But New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New York State specifically, there's some incredible megalithic monuments. So these are some of the themes we're just going to run through today. I'm going to do this within an hour, hopefully. So there's chambers and standing stones in Vermont. There's the famous American Stonehenge, which is New Hampshire. There's a hill that roars at Neshoba. Rhode Island and the Dighton Rock. Dolmens and chambers of New York State. Gunjewamp and the Irish monks who were supposed to have founded it. Anomalous artifacts, and we're going to have a look at some descriptions of potential early explorers. And interestingly, one of my main areas of research is the lost fertility technologies of the ancients. Because a lot of this stuff, a lot of this new science was actually rediscovered by working and checking these sites. There's also a Mormon connection, which I find very interesting, because New England, Vermont is where Joseph Smith was born. And he was born right in the middle of all these megalithic chambers. And basically, we really are, if this research gets out there, I mean, other authors have already written about this. But we're really looking at rewriting the history of America. It really is about that. There's so much there. There's volumes and volumes you could write about it. And so we're just going to have a look at one area, though, which is the New England states. So my journey started in Vermont when I was invited to speak at the Earth Spirit Conference. And we then went exploring to some of the megalithic chambers. The first one we went to was Calendar 1, and this is in South Royalton, Vermont. And this has got a very interesting landscape. There's quite a few different sites in that whole area spread out across the landscape. And this has been researched and looked at by various archaeoastronomers, and they found that it is a sort of ceremonial ritual landscape which covers quite a wide area. And this is the first site we went to, and this is very near where Joseph Smith was supposed to have been born. I don't know if you can see the chamber on the bottom left there. I'm just sort of contemplating going into it and thinking, oh my God, this looks a bit small. But I did manage to get in there, and this is a photograph I took, and you can see the rock carvings sort of on the top of on the first lintel on the way into the chamber. Now, this is something that appears at lots of the sites in Vermont and throughout New England, actually. There seems to be these almost Ogham script, which is something Barry Fell in America, BC, really researched thoroughly and documented. But just down the road from this chamber is the Mormon connection. This is the sort of obelisk that was put up to commemorate where Joseph Smith was born. And he was said to have found these golden or bronze tablets with all this information on it, and it all related to a very ancient culture in America, saying that the Jews, I think, came over to America and built many parts of the mound culture and the megalithic cultures in that particular part of America. And it's a suggestion that actually he found these gold discs in the chamber we just looked at. Nothing of this has been confirmed. We don't know if it was just a story he kind of created. However, he was living right within the most important megalithic landscape in New England. This is another part of the Calendar 1 complex. This is called the Eagle Chamber, and these are just some of the stones that I photographed. They're quite small, some of them, but they're definitely being designed and sort of placed accordingly. In fact, in the summer of 1980, a dig started, and they believed it was a colonial farm settlement. But what they found out much later through archaeological dating is that it's at least over 1,000 or 1,500 years old. This shows you the actual chamber from within, and I'm just having a little nap there on the right. But at the top and the back of the chamber itself, which has got these huge megalithic lintels going all the way back, there's actually a hole at the very top, as though we're not sure why that is, whether they were star watching or exactly what they were doing. But I also did some dowsing there, and I took my magnetometer there. I found that there's some very interesting telluric energies kind of going into the chamber and building up within. And there's also a major energy current that swept through the chamber as well, which I found very interesting, because the tests that have been done at these sites to do with the fertility technologies really do back this up. Here's just a shot of the chamber. I think it's a really beautiful photograph, actually. It just shows you the sort of quaintness and the beautiful design, and the way it's like an entrance into the Earth Mother or the Goddess or whatever, however you want to look at it. But I see this as a kind of symbol, and it's very similar to some of the chambers we see in Europe as well. I mean, the similarities are remarkable. This is up on the hill. This is the main part of the Calendar 1 chamber. Not much left of it now. But some researchers who wrote the book Manitou came across this and studied the whole landscape over a several-year period, and went there on the solstices and equinoxes and cross-quarter days, and got some amazing archaeoastronomical kind of photographs. These are the ones, this is the equinox sunrise, which seems to be aligned precisely east with the chamber itself, as though from sitting inside it. And they've done a huge amount of research on this and analysed this really carefully. And this is the sort of map they came up with to look at all the different stones placed around the whole complex. And you can see that all the different times of the year are kind of covered within the site itself. We don't really have time to give this a proper analysis, but you're welcome to have a look at the book. I got their book with me. And these are in the style of Alexander Thom. They're very influenced by his astroarchaeological work, and it just shows you the way that they were using the landscape and the hills and the mountains in the far distance on the horizon as marker points and observation points, rather than just within the structure itself, which is something that's been recognised throughout the British Isles and Europe as well, according to Alexander Thom. This is a site just a few miles away from there. It's in South Woodstock, Vermont. This is they're called Calendar 2, and this is pretty much one of the largest sort of chambers I've ever seen. In North America, rather. So it's a huge megaliths they've got here. I mean, the archaeologists constantly claim these are just colonial root cellars to store vegetables, but the fact that they're moving 20 or 30 ton blocks to put as the roof is kind of quite an effort just to protect your potatoes. And it's also, the inside of the chamber is a 2-to-1 ratio, which is the same as the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid as well. So it's like two cubes, basically one next to the other. And there's also, again, there's another flue hole or a light hole at the back, which could have been used to observe stars directly above as well. And it's still being used by some Native Americans to this day, apparently. This just shows you the winter solstice sunrise alignment, because this is precisely aligned to the winter solstice time of year, the sunrise. And you can see that on the right hand side is something that the authors put together, and a photograph they took, and it just shows you the similarities we see with the chambers. Particularly Newgrange springs to mind because of the winter solstice alignment, but there's many other chambers that have that alignment too. And it's also, they believe, through their studies and working upon Alexander Thom's discoveries, they believe it was also used for lunar observation because of the view from within the chamber itself. And also as eclipse prediction, in the same way that Stonehenge, they now have worked out to be an eclipse predictor. And so they think that these chambers were so well aligned, and rather than have everything in one particular site like at Stonehenge, they have them spread out over the landscape. This is just another shot here. It was taken much earlier, but you can see the size of the lintels, on the roof basically. And so, like I said, some of them are like 20 tons, some up to 25 tons. So we're looking at major kind of megalithic monument in Vermont, which a lot of people didn't even know. I didn't even know they were really there until I got there myself and was shown around. So now I moved swiftly down to New Hampshire, and the next state along in New England, and I found that there's something there called America Stonehenge, and this kind of quite excited me because of just the name that was given to it. But the older name given to the complex where it was actually built, it's called Mystery Hill. And this is just took loads of really nice photographs there. Excuse, I just sort of fell over there, and never mind. But they've been dating this site. The archaeologists have actually got involved, and it's been bought out by this individual and this family who actually look after the site now, and they're very into the ancient mysteries and the archaeoastronomy. So they've actually paid people to come in and excavate the site, and they found finds there from 200 AD all the way back to 4,000 years ago. So we're looking at about 2000 BC, which is almost contemporary with Stonehenge. And so this is kind of it's the only really one of the only sites that's been dated to that particular era, although it suggests all the other sites in the whole of New England, which have a very similar style and look, could be as far back as that. So we must start speculating who could have done this. I mean, who could have built these sites, and why were they building them? America Stonehenge particularly is very interesting because it's aligned to many different times of the year, all the solstices, equinoxes, and the cross-quarter days. We'll have a look at a map of that in a moment. This image here shows just some of the megalithic stonework as an example, but there's a lot more than this. It's a huge complex actually. It's quite incredible the way they've kind of put this together. This just shows you all the different alignments you get from the central kind of platform in the middle of the Mystery Hill complex, and you can see quite clearly there's like the green thing is just a path that's gone around it, but these just show you all the different alignments, and almost every single alignment, quite sometimes up to 100 or 150 meters away from the central point, is a stone which is upright and marking that particular alignment. So what they've done, they've cleared all the trees away for all these alignments, and people can go there and observe all the different times of year. So this is my friend Larry. He's just demonstrating the sort of size of these stones. Look at the size of them great lintels and the one on top. And it was claimed initially, the archaeologists, of course, claimed that it was built by the farmer or the guy who moved there and his 3 daughters, which is fundamentally wrong because he actually had 3 sons, so they got that wrong to start with, and so they must have been, maybe they were the giants. I mean, who knows? But this shows you the equinox sunrise alignment stone, and you can see behind, and they've cleared the trees away, so you can observe it even to this day. This is the summer solstice sunrise stone. Some of them are quite sloped and shaped, like some of the ones actually in Essex, interestingly, along the Locks of Drone. This is the summer solstice sunset stone. So we've got sunrises and sunsets marking all around the whole complex. This is the Samhain alignment, around November the 1st, of the sunrise there. And this is an interesting little bit of technology that was discovered there. The small hole in it, which you can see on the right-hand picture, it's actually been drilled, but it's been drilled like 90 degrees and then back out again, which is unusual. So they probably went in from 2 sides, but they were using drills potentially in prehistoric times somehow. And these drill marks do pop up. They popped up in some of the New York rock chambers, as we'll see soon. This is the sacrificial table, which I didn't go on myself, but it's 4.5 tons, so it's quite a beast. And there's a speaking tube as well, which is so if someone was to actually sit on the table and actually speak into this kind of sort of gap in the rocks, it would be amplified slightly out into the main arena of the site. So it's almost like it was like an auditorium. Whether it was a sacrificial table is up for debate, but it has kind of grooves cut around it, which the early archaeologists suggest is where the blood would collect, which is nice. But it could have been just to prepare food on as well, like if they were cutting up large animals. But moving away from Mystery Hill, there's another interesting site called the Beehive Hut in Danville, which is also in New Hampshire. It's just probably about 4 miles away from Mystery Hill, and it's in between a kind of chemical works and someone's back garden that's got a little putting green on it. So it's quite a strange location, but we went there anyway and found this, and we're quite blown away by this because again, I dowsed there again like I do at all the sites, and found that the earth energies there are very strong as well, and the telluric energy is particularly strong. So again, it could have been one of these fertility generator sites, which we'll explore a little bit later. So Pelham in New Hampshire, which is a further few miles away from there, is a potential stone circle, one of the only ones in America. But it was found that it was actually a much earlier site that got moved because a hospital got built there. But the guys who moved it and rebuilt it did it exactly the same as it was, apparently. So what we're seeing here is a perfect reconstruction of what was previously about maybe 200 meters away. And it's 62 feet long. It has a kind of sort of egg shape around it. It's not like a flattened egg like in Alexander Thom's work. But I'm just checking my notes here. But it was being recorded by some of the Native American sort of peoples who lived there as well from much earlier date. So it does go back to at least 400 or 500 years, if not way beyond, potentially the same as the chambers. So it's called Druid Hill. It's just a close-up of some of the stones, sort of classic megalithic look. And this just shows you a sort of sky view of what it kind of looks like. And you can see that it's kind of an unusual shape, which some people compare it to a Ouija board or sort of things that are similar to that. But so whether that was sort of implemented in the redesign, we don't know. We're not sure if it's an exact kind of reconstruction yet, nor are the archaeologists. This is interesting because the famous Melantoll stone in Cornwall, there's one in New Hampshire, which is pretty much the same size. It looks almost like the same stone to me. If you look at the design of it in the bottom right-hand side there with the person standing next to it. And there's many legends associated with the British ones of these, obviously, that if a child is passed through the stone, it has a healing effect. It's related to fertility, that if people go there, they become more fertile. There's all these rituals that go way back into prehistory. And there's quite a few of these stones around Britain, actually, which are kind of related to this. But the fact that there's one in New Hampshire, again, just shows another clue that we're looking at possibly the same people who are building and constructing these sites. So, after New Hampshire, we went to New York State, and I didn't really expect to find one of the world's most amazing dolmens just along the road, about 30 or 40 miles north of New York. But surprisingly, you come across this, which is one of the most amazing sites I've ever visited, actually, in my life, to be honest with you. It's an incredible place. It just stands there on its own. The whole area around it is kind of residential. It's quite wooded. It's on the just on the top of this sort of slope or sort of cliff face that sort of goes down. And it's been found there's a huge magnetic fluctuation that goes round the whole site and through it. In fact, there's a major negative magnetic anomaly right underneath the stone itself. So, however, as per usual, the sign says, and the archaeologists back this up, that it's a glacial erratic that came from about 50 miles away and landed on top of these 5 quartz blocks, precisely balancing itself. And interestingly, the measurements between the rocks, the smaller rocks underneath, are all based upon Alexander Thom's megalithic yard. So they seem to sort of, it's a brilliant piece of work, you know, how that might have happened. But obviously, even the Native Americans have no idea who constructed this. It's way too big to try and shift it. It weighs potentially 90 tons. So we're looking at something that's moved several miles. It's 90 tons. We're looking at major megalithic engineering here. The next one, this one is just sort of big, great orb appeared when Larry was photographing me, which I thought was quite nice. But you can see the size of that. I mean, that is quite impressive, you must admit, if you. But the reason I went here is because I'd looked at the work of John Burke and Kaj Halberg in their excellent book Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, and they'd done some research here, and they discovered they looked at all the geology in the area and found that it was right along this zone of magnetic fluctuation and right on top of a negative magnetic anomaly, which they believed through their research and through their scientific testing that it actually builds up charge there at certain times of day, and then people used to go there and place there and make offerings there as a sort of ritual site, which later it's been discovered and worked out by these guys that it's actually, you put your seeds there and then you go and for an hour maybe, then you go and plant them, and you get a huge increase in yield and quality of your crop. So we're realizing many of these sites could have been built for this purpose. This I explore in much more detail in the Stone Age Survival DVD, which was filmed here, interestingly enough. This just shows you the actual magnetic anomaly at the site. And again, this is an earlier photo taken by John Burke himself, and it's first thing in the morning, just before sunrise. And you can see again the orbs that appeared, and this was with this wasn't a digital camera, this was a normal camera. So he's been getting these strange light phenomena in many of the sites he was visiting, because he started his research about 12 years ago, and he had a normal camera and a digital camera in many of the photos. And that's the book. I highly recommend that. It's a very good book, and it could be one of the most important discoveries in the megalithic world. This just shows you some other sites. They're very similar. I mean, these are like more like balanced rocks than they are dolmens as such, because there's just a few small stones underneath them. But again, even to get this larger capstone on top of the smaller ones is quite a task in itself. And Maver and Dix, who are kind of the authors of Manitou, made this sort of suggestion that they are structurally identical to ones in Great Britain and Korea, interestingly, because dolmens seem to be all around the world, as we've known. This one up on the top left here, this is Lynn, Massachusetts. Still there, you can still go and visit it. I didn't find it myself. The one down here is Lake Legenda in Minnesota. So we're looking at further into the Americas, and we find these kind of scattered, but mainly in the northeast section of America. Just to give you an example of the worldwide scale of this sort of prehistoric engineering, dolmens seem to appear everywhere around the world, in almost every country. We've just seen that in South Africa now, thanks to Michael's presentation. But there's ones in Wales, France, Tunisia, Jordan. There's been in Korea, as already mentioned. In fact, I've just found out recently from my friend Charlie Sturton, who went to Korea. He phoned me up, quite excited, and just shouted at me virtually that there's 19,000 dolmens in Korea, which I thought was quite a number, considering I didn't even think there was more than 10. However, so we see these from all around the world, and so this kind of interests me, that the fact that we have the same design in this part of North America. So moving swiftly on, I didn't actually make it to this site, New Jersey, but this is just another example. It's called the Tripod Rock, and it does kind of move slightly if you just sort of nudge it. But there's something to be said about the piezoelectrical effect of some of these sites, because when you've got this kind of weight on smaller quartz rocks, it has a piezoelectrical effect and can build up charge, which I find very interesting from my earth energies and fertility research. These are some stone seats. The one on the left there is which one is that? They call it the Druid's Chair from Boston, Massachusetts. And over on the right-hand side is the stone seat in Chester in New Hampshire. So Massachusetts and New Hampshire have these amazing megalithic seats. Now, there's quite a lot of folklore associated with the similar type of seats in England. But there's no folklore available in America for many of these sites. The whole New England, New York area, there's no native population there anymore. It's all been completely taken over, because that was one of the first places the English and the Europeans came and dominated. However, these are linked with fertility again, these stone seats. Like the Wharton in Lancashire, there's a place called the Bride's Chair, which was said to be a quick fix for fertility. You go and sit in it as a woman to make sure to help you become pregnant. And there's also another one in Braham Wood, in Dingwall in Highland, Scotland, in Edinburgh as well as another stone seat, and there's many in all around Scotland, and some in Ireland and some in northern England. So there's probably about 10 recorded altogether, and several of them have this folklore associated with them, that they're fertility seats. They're there to be sat on to bring fertility to the woman. And there's apparently one in Avebury as well, thanks to Louis. So this just shows you the southwestern part of New England, where all the chambers are. It just gives you a map of the whole thing, really, so you can actually see the sheer magnitude of these sites just in this smaller area. It's quite prolific. But New York State is very interesting, because New York State is the only state, really, that still has some mounds, some earth mounds in it, as part of the kind of Midwestern culture. But also has the megaliths on the far eastern side as well. So it's like the bridge between the two worlds, the megalithic New England and the Midwest mound culture. And this is just one of the mounds here on Onondaga Park, Syracuse, New York. There's hundreds of these mounds though. Again, I went to a talk by the New England Archaic Research Association conference in Rhode Island, and there's a guy there that had this brilliant talk about the mounds of New York State, and again lots of giants were discovered within them, and there's all these revelations and stuff coming out. There was great wars there even, which is completely, there's nothing in the history books about any of this. But the NERA, or the New England Archaic Research Association, I really highly recommend you check them out. I think it's nera.org, the website. They've got huge amounts of research and data on there. And the author of the book, I think called The Lost Mounds of New York State, is Norman Brockenshire. And again, he thinks it's related to the Joseph Smith connection, and the way Joseph Smith and all his prophecies were talking about these mounds and these ancient sites within this area. It's just another one nearby in Cooperstown, New York State. These aren't exactly huge, these ones, but he said there's something like probably 300 or 400 just within New York State itself. And then you have to go travel. It's quite a wide New York State, in case any of you are wondering. Much further on the east is where it starts blending into the megalithic sites, such as these. This is in Kent Cliffs, and this is a fascinating place because the thing I found with many of these chambers, for some reason, they seem to be along the side of the road. And this was happening at, probably a majority of the chambers that I visited. And this is the Kent Cliffs one. A lot of research was done here by John Burke and Cadge Halberg, testing seeds and see if they would enhance their yield and quality. And they did get some interesting results. You can see the orbs in the top left of the top left photo there. But it gets more interesting than that. You should get them right in the centre of the chambers as well. And whether it's a droplet of water, a speck of dust, we don't know, but it kept happening. And these are the same sites that were tested by John Burke and Cadge Halberg, and actually they got the results from. And they were taking photographs of the same places and actually getting the same orbs without digital cameras. This is in the vicinity of Clarence Farnstock State Park, if anyone's going to visit up there. And it's also the site of an old magnetite mine. And there's when you have the magnetite, it's very beneficial for harnessing this kind of energy for the fertility purposes, which we'll look at shortly. This is another one in Kent Cliffs. This is like you can walk to here from the other one. Just you walk down the road and it's on the right. It's just so close. Again, yet another chamber with great megalithic kind of lintels going across. And this is a magnetic, again, this site is right on top of a negative magnetic anomaly. And you can see on the map on the left there that this shows you the magnetic flux of how the strength in magnetism changes throughout that particular area. Right at the entrance to the chamber is the most powerful negative magnetic anomaly, which is where this band plasma, or this light beam, or whatever you want to call it, was actually photographed, again, by a normal camera. There's quite a lot of research has been done on this. Many of the sites in this part of New York State have actually, it was UFO research carried out. I can't remember the author's name, but it was UFO research where all these lights were being seen in the sky, and they started noting it and sort of following where these lights would end up because they tended to move. That's why people thought they were UFOs. And whenever they located the source of where these lights were going, there was always one of these chambers there. So what that means, we don't know. Whether they were designed to affect the weather, they were designed to affect the energies, etc., etc. It's just been started to be researched properly by people like John Burke and others. And from this particular chamber as well, there's reports of ghost-like entities, humming sounds, and lights actually coming out of the chamber as well. Different coloured lights, I believe. So again, this is Kent Cliffs 2. This is from another book, and again, it's got drill marks, as we mentioned earlier. Quite large drill marks in one of the stones on the side wall. So this one was, this is at Putnam City, New York, and again, these are just the light phenomena that keeps appearing at these sites. Many of the sites have been recorded over many years, and lots of sort of first-hand reports from people that there are, it's actually very strange energies going on here. Many of these sites are either have magnetite within the geology, there's differing geology, and they meet where these sites are built, and so on and so forth. And at last, it's been something's been put together with this, that it is actually to do with this fertility technology. This is another one at near Kent Cliffs. It's in Ninham State Park. And these are the tests that were done. On the top left there, these are some blue corn there were seeds that were placed inside the chamber for 75 minutes, and controls that weren't placed inside the chamber at all. And when they went to plant them, eventually the yield, they noticed, was a threefold increase, and they were slightly bigger. And there's reports here that going back quite a while that people would travel, Native Americans would travel from miles around to actually take their seeds there as what they originally thought was just offerings. Actually, they were taking their seeds there to get them charged up, so when they went to plant them, they got much better results. And the stories throughout America, it's the same sort of technology they were using in the mound culture area, and also even in the southwest. There's a lot of it in places like Sedona and Arizona and so forth. The energy there, it's all iron sort of based rocks. But what they found here was that they tested it at lots of different sites, and they seemed to keep getting similar results. And the bottom picture here, the two images there, are actually from a Mayan pyramid, or in Guatemala, at Tikal. That's one of the older pyramids there, called the Lost World Pyramid, which was built much earlier than the sort of more political orientated pyramids in the central complex of Tikal. And again, they got the same results. When they took the seeds to the top of this pyramid, they got a massive increase and higher quality crop yield. And so we're feeling this may have been one of the agricultural energy technologies of the ancients, which again I cover that quite clearly in my other DVD. Here's one I didn't go to. This was just sent to me by a friend of mine called Jason, and it's another one in New York at Patterson. And again, you can see the guy standing there and the sheer size of those lintels. So now we're going to check out Massachusetts, and we went to visit some of these sites during the NERA conference, or the conference that weekend I was there. It was actually the same weekend as this, exactly a year ago. And this is in one of the museums in a place called, they found it on the beach in a place called Dighton in Taunton, Mass. And they've got these very strange carvings which they couldn't really work out what they meant. And they still really haven't been worked out. But we went to visit it actually in the museum, had a little tour there. And but it connects with this one, which is the Dighton Rock. Again in Taunton. Again, this was found actually out in the sea, and they had to actually move it up slightly because it was getting worn out so much. And again, they have no idea who did this or where it came from. Obviously, there's brilliant theories about Templars, the megalithic peoples, Celtic Christians, etc., etc. There's lots of ideas about who did it, but no one actually knows. And it's almost like there's they found there's three different types of hieroglyphics actually on the rock itself, which suggests it may have been a stone that was like popping out of the water as people sailed into this bay. And actually it could have been marked on saying we've entered this land or we're leaving this land. Again, this is all very much up for speculation. There's been a lot of research done on it. Again, it's just another photo which doesn't really show you much. But again, it's a 40-ton boulder. It's very, very large. This is an old postcard, which I thought was quite nice. Yeah, and actually the guy on it was called Seth Easterman, if anyone's interested, circa 1853. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about the Dighton Rock, but I don't really want to get into that now. This is some other sites in Massachusetts. The Rocking Stone in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. I didn't get a chance to find it, but there's quite a few of these rocking stones actually throughout New England. You can see quite the magnitude of that, and the fact that that guy's really risking his life. Down here, this is the famous Groton Chamber, which has got, people have no idea why it was built like this. Again, they think it goes back to sometime before Christ. I'm not sure exactly when. I didn't get a chance to go there either, but you can see the kind of weirdness that they built it right into the ground, like they were hiding or storing stuff there. It just shows you a sort of close-up of the rest of the chamber. Sorry, this is the Upton Chamber, again in Massachusetts. This just shows you the inside of that, and this was some pictures that were put together by Byron and Dix in their Manitou book. This is some old photographs of the Upton Chamber. You can see, again, to me that's very reminiscent of some of the Irish sort of rock chambers, and Newgrange, Knowth and so forth. It's got a circular design within the middle. And this kind of interesting. My friend Jason pointed this out to me, who lives in that area, and that there's what they think are sweat lodges in Ireland. Some of these chambers have had no real explanation for them. A lot of people now think in the smaller chambers are like sweat lodges. And you have exactly the same design in New England as well. Some of the chambers there, they're almost like this is one of the only reasons they could have, perhaps been built. That's the one in Ireland there. This is the one in Massachusetts, Hopkinson. Again, very large, quite an effort to have a sauna. This is the Narragansett stone, the rune stone that's actually off. Again, it's actually in the sea off the coast of Rhode Island. Very unusual. A lot of speculation about this. They believe it's a medieval inscription. However, because it's a runic kind of language that's on there, it could go back much further. And this starts linking in with the Vikings and other sort of Norse travellers that potentially came over. There's lots of speculation about this, and we had to paddle out there, a whole group of us, sort of pull our trousers up, and to see it. And so, yeah, it's quite intriguing. But again, if you look at it carefully, you can see that it looks like it could have been done a few months ago. It doesn't look really ancient, but that could be because the sea's keeping it clean or whatever. But again, it's ignored by the archaeologists. Luckily, we have the New England Archaic Research Association to sort of protect these sites, and show people them. So moving down to Rhode Island. No, sorry, that was off the coast of Massachusetts. That previous slide, not Rhode Island, I think. So moving down to Rhode Island now. This is at the Queen's Fort, North Kingston in Rhode Island. This is what's called the Twin Whales, and there's a very strange complex up there. Well, there's lots of these different rocks and sort of ceremonial landscape within the whole place. Very interesting earth energies and telluric stuff going on there. But it's grown over. It was autumn, so leaves were covering everything, so you couldn't really see much up there. But this is supposed to be a sort of ceremonial site, and also they think between the rocks, when all the trees weren't there, there was a sight line towards one of the solstices. There's also many of these cairns as well. This is called Turkey Meadow Brook Cairnfield in Coventry, Rhode Island. There's hundreds of these all over the place, all over this particular area, as though they're marking a kind of trackway. And what the actual potential reason, no one quite knows why they were put there, but some of them go so far back that they were again discovered by the Native Americans and left and honoured as such. But and there's very long walls as well that have been built between them. There are traditions that they do create a kind of energy charge when you pile certain types of rock up at certain places. This is something that's been discovered at some European sites, but we don't really know exactly why they're there. This is the dolmen. It's more of a balanced rock, really. It's got like 3 stones underneath it. Can't really see it clearly there. But not far from there, a place called Foster is yet another stone chamber, which interestingly is just behind a nudist camp. So you have to actually go through the nudist camp. Yet you can keep your clothes on if you're going to look at the chamber, which is a relief. A very interesting sort of stone right at the back of the chamber where I believe the light would hit. It's this great sort of crystalline white crystal rock, which no research has been really done on this chamber as yet, so we couldn't really kind of test it out. But also in Rhode Island, it's probably one of the most interesting of that area, even though it may not be as ancient as many of the other sites, is the Newport Tower. And there's a huge amount of debate about who built this, why it was built, what's it all about. It looks like the sort of bottom of an Irish round tower, really, with the top chopped off it. But however, there's lots of theories from the Vikings, even Chinese origin. Some researchers have put it forward. Knights Templar, the Celtic monks. There's the whole voyage of Brendan from Ireland, came over, spent months, all these strange mystical happenings happening before he got there. Then he had to go back, apparently. There's the Sinclair family, which kind of keeps popping up with this Newport thing, because they seem to be some connection with this and stuff going up at Roslin and other sites. So there is like a Templar Freemasonic connection there. Another theory is about Portugal, Portuguese explorers, because some of the carvings in it look a little bit like their language. But one of the most interesting things is that it's a very detailed and accurate astronomical kind of calendar system, which is sort of mapped out here. And it also connects with other sites within the landscape. And the whole list here is all the different theories. So you could probably add to that just today if you wanted to. But there are some very, when you actually get inside the tower, you see how it was carefully placed, it was carefully cut, the stone, so you can see that they were aligning it and kind of doing a proper job on it with the technology they had there. So that really deserves a bit more investigation, I think. But one of the things that interests me is that it appears on this this Mercator map, 1569. You can actually see the chamber on it. Where's it gone? Well, there's a close-up of it there. You actually see some kind of oh crikey! You can actually see some kind of structure there. It's actually this area just here. So it just shows you that from at least 1569 it was already built. So, continuing into Massachusetts, this is a very interesting area. It's Neshoba Hill. There's the guy on the left is Glenn Broughton, who I was travelling around New England with. The guy on the right is a guy called Dan Budillion, who basically is the main guy behind the New England Archaic Research Association, and he guided me around some of the most interesting sites. Neshoba is actually a great hill, which is known as the hill that roars, and it creates all this light phenomenon, and occasionally, probably every 50 years or something, it makes this huge roaring sound, as though it's like a sort of great animal under the ground. And loads of legends have come from that, and huge domes of light have appeared next to the lake that's beside it. He's got lots of photos, hundreds of reports of all this kind of stuff that's been happening there. But it is actually one of the places where the local natives actually continued into much earlier last century, until they were finally kind of engulfed by Western civilization. This is another chamber. We decided to do a bit of posing at this one. But again, this one, is just on the side of a road. And one thing, as you're probably aware of in America, especially New England at the moment, there's lots of road widening schemes taking place because of the increase in traffic and so forth. And the problem that's going on here really is the whole fact that the archaeologists aren't recording these as archaeological ancient sites. They're seeing them all as colonial route sellers. This is like becoming a joke. Especially in America. We get similar things in other parts of the world, obviously, but the fact is that some of these are so close to the road, they're just going to be demolished straight away because they're nothing of interest. Even the colonial route sellers, there's so many of them, they think. There's so many of these chambers that they just assume they're of no importance. And so people like Dan Budillion are really, really at odds with this, and they're really going all out to protect them and kind of build up a whole kind of network of people to kind of, guard the sites as such. And this one is just next to like the bus stop, and this is the one I just took an inkling to take a photo a few seconds later, and suddenly there's a great big orb in it, so I thought it was quite nice. This is just down the road from there. It's about a 5-minute walk. It's on someone's private property, but you can actually go in there. It's a little stream just in front of that, but on the other side of this one, there's a very small, tiny little chamber you can just fit through, but you can't. It's all filled up with mud and stuff now. But what they found with that one is that it actually travels about 50 meters, and it goes into the basement of a house that was then built upon. So there's probably another chamber at the other end of it that then got built upon. So they were kind of doing all these little underground sort of things. I'm not sure why they would do that. However, they were. This is quite near. This is in the whole Neshoba area of Massachusetts. This is called a Half Moon Meadow Brook, and this is if you stand back, from where we're standing at the bottom photo, there's actually a wall that's been built where there's a slope that goes down. They've actually built a wall along there, yeah. And at one point in the wall, there's this very large stone, and it's kind of like oddly placed. And so Dan Budillion thought, well, why would that? So he thought, well, why not stand on that and work out the directions of where that is, and then you could see this great stone at the end. It's got like a split in it, like a V cut into it. And he found out quite quickly when he went there for the winter solstice that the sunrise of winter solstice perfectly rises through this gap in the stone in the distance, which is this great stone here. And he kept finding all these kind of anomalies just through personal kind of observation. This is Sarah Dublé forest. And there's been this legend of this place where she was kind of part of a Native American tribe. They were kind of hunted by the British and the Europeans, and she hid for a while to sort of stay safe from them. And there was all this idea that she hid in a little cave which she just could fit in, and it's never been found, this cave in the whole area. And then Dan Boudillion just had this inkling, and he cleared away some leaves and twigs and a few rocks and found this tiny little chamber, which he realised was probably the chamber which Sarah Doublé hid in to protect herself. So again, there's all these little discoveries that could be made in New England that's still being made. These are some other perched boulders and the rocking stones of Neshoba. I think the one on the right hand side is the 1 ton rocking stone, and that's near Harvard, actually near Harvard, not that far from Boston. And the one on the left is the Nagog Pond perched stone, which is right. Nagog Pond is very close to Neshoba Hill, the main hill there. If you travel further west to Heath in Massachusetts, there's potentially the other stone circle of New England. This is called Burnt Hill Stone Circle. And again, this is kind of, a lot of people are thinking perhaps this is actually, the only real stone circle, because the other one that we saw looked like it had been reconstructed. However, didn't get a chance to go up here. It's on private land. We tried to contact the people, and there was just no answer, so we just didn't have a chance to go there, unfortunately. But apparently it's quite an impressive site on a very high hill. And then there's Gunjiwamp, which is another sort of ancient complex that in Connecticut this time. These are the sort of small remnants of a kind of stone chamber, stone circle. And on the right hand side there's some orbs that were photographed. Again, these were taken with a normal camera, not with a digital camera, so if anyone's questioning the whole digital thing with orbs. However, there's a place there, actually where them orbs are, it's called the Hill of Tears, and there's this old story that goes quite far back and even up to modern times as well. And it's now run by the Gunjiwamp Society, and they look after it and protect it and so forth. So it's well protected now. However, and what they found, the Hill of Tears, whenever anyone went up there, something would happen to them. Like they would immediately have an emotional reaction. At this particular spot, it's actually where the stones are there on the left. At this particular spot, they would start crying, they would break down in tears, they would get kind of emotional, they'd have sometimes have altered states. All these strange things. Some people would start, if they had a cut that was like a scab, it would start bleeding and things like that. All these strange kind of physical, energetic effects that were happening to people when they visited this particular site. My friend Jim, who's part of the Antiquarian Society, actually got them photos of them orbs for me, which I think I was very impressed by. Also, as a certain NASA astronomer who did some research at this particular site, and says there's a line of stones there that go away from the small circle you see on the left, and it acts as a Venus calendar, which is very interesting for people who've read the work of Christopher Knight and others in Uriel's Machine and so forth. And also an equinox sunrise, there's an equinox sunrise chamber there, which again is perfectly aligned to the sunrise for the equinox. So there's quite a few, this is just a handful of sites we've really looked at today, it's not that many. But here's just some of the characteristics of the New England chambers. Like their European counterparts, they always face towards the east, or they face towards a particular alignment. They don't seem to be random. Now some people have questioned this because there's some sites that seem to be just off or a little bit further than they should be. But when you look at the actual landscape of where the sun's rising, it's actually rising officially behind the horizon and then pops out at that particular point where it's aligned to. So those that just go there with a compass and dismiss it, actually when you do the research, it's all to do with the sort of topography and how high up you are. And so there's a lot of research is starting to be done on that now, to the deviation. And again, like it says here, these are just some points here that they do seem to be related to all the different times of the year, which I think is a very important factor to consider in this. So that's kind of my review, my little tour around the ancient sites of New England. But I decided to go and look at some brand new ones that Rob Roy, who wrote the excellent book called Stone Circles, he lives up in West Chazy in New York State. And he's just, I've got a few more images as well, but he's standing there with Glenn Broughton. Rob Roy's on the left in that top photo. But these are some of the tools and some of the he just does this for fun, this guy. He just kind of decides to build a stone circle or a dolmen, just does it for fun. And he's actually coming over to Megalithomania this year, so we might have the opportunity to build a stone circle up on a land near Glastonbury. So hopefully that will happen. I've got some more photos of that as well. Oh, sorry, I've got my slides mixed up here. So there's more characteristics as well, which is just some other points. One of the we saw it in the chamber at Calendar 1 in Vermont. That there's always carvings across the top lintel, the first lintel as you go into the chamber, which they believe is either an Ogden description and potentially it's of the god Baal as well, which seems to pop up in many of these chambers. It's like an old pagan kind of tradition. There's also Phoenician letters as well. And the inner walls of the ceiling lintels commonly carry other inscribed material, including phallic carvings. So this could represent the fertility sort of symbols and the fertility technology we've already addressed in this lecture. And this is a proper colonial root cellar, just in case you're wondering. See the not very big stones? Yeah, I mean, look at the size of that. That must be like 2 feet wide. So yeah, we can just see that this kind of, this is why they're claiming these are colonial root cellars, although obviously the chambers aren't that. So this is just where the spot marks where Rob Roy lives. It's almost in Canada, just up at Lake Champlain. This is one of the stones he constructed just on an afternoon. He just sort of put it up, and he does workshops there. And we went there. He built his own house as well. It's an amazing, beautiful house. It's all self-sufficient and everything. But he's an amazing guy. Something about him. He just gets on with it. He's really practical. He's not into all the cosmic ideas. He just goes in there and just tries to suss out how the ancients did it. And that's it. That's his mission. And I really respect that. It just shows you the size of. They did a Stonehenge lintel, a kind of a trillathon workshop, and the thing on the right hand side there just shows you that in the card, just to give you some scale. A small dolmen on the top left, and his stone circle on the bottom there. Again, I'm showing you the same photo twice, but it just leaves me really with this whole idea that why all around the world we have these amazing sites. We have these amazing sites that aren't looked at properly. I mean, we're seeing this in South Africa, we're seeing this in lots of different places. And it's getting to a point where development, especially in America, obviously, there's going to be destruction of these sites because they're not recognised. And I really blame the archaeologists, and I openly say that, because they're not doing their job. They're not saying what is there. They're not giving it a proper attention it needs. They don't want to go against the classical history books because it means a load of work for them, and they want to stick to their paradigm, and it's kind of like it's just got to this point where they're not glacial erratics, they're not colonial root cellars. Why isn't this being recognised? And I think this is, this needs to be addressed. And with the destruction of sites like we're seeing at Thornborough, Henges, up in Yorkshire, with tarmac trying to sort of dig all around it, and also we see it in Tara. They've actually made, by destroying Tara, they found some of the most amazing discoveries, and then made sure they were destroyed by building over them. So it's kind of weird kind of headspace people have got into, where they've lost contact with what these sites really mean. And the fact that there's no native traditions left in New England anymore, it kind of it's lost itself a little bit further. But big respect to the New England Archaic Research Association. I really highly recommend, if you want to find out more, check out their website and get in touch with them. So that's their website there, and also there's Dan Boudillion's website as well. I do highly recommend you check his stuff out. He's done some beautiful research into all the sites, and he's one of the sort of top people over there. And hopefully he's going to be coming over to England soon as well. And there's just is my book about Earth Grids, which looks at the whole global connection with all these sites. And on the right is a DVD I recorded here like 2 or 3 years ago, describing all the fertility technologies. And one final plug for the conference. And you'll see that Rob Roy's coming to that as well. So thank you so much for listening.